I'm Adam DeBruler, and I will be presenting my project for the Data Mining and Stat Learning course at Georgia Tech, where I modeled and explored clusters of combat stat archetypes in the Pokemon video games. Pokemon is a massively popular series of video games where players explore the countryside and save the region by partnering with wild creatures called Pokemon. For this project, I scraped the data from PokeAPI for the 1,203 currently available unique Pokemon forms. The two most important details are that each form has either one or two elemental types from among 18, and they have 6 combat stats that quantify how they're equipped to fight. They are detailed here, but I will paint the picture more for each group later on. In addition, I gathered other ecological data regarding how Pokemon appear, evolve, and breed. With this data, my primary goal was to identify what combat archetypes, which I will call groups, are present, using k-means clustering, and how those groups are distributed among different type Pokemon. Secondarily, I wanted to see how useful these groups are as a factor in predicting Pokemon types, which I evaluated using a random forest classifier. As mentioned earlier, k-means clustering was the driving method for identifying groups in this data. It is an unsupervised learning method, which means that I did not have to know or assign the groups to the data before training. Rather, the model created the groups based on which data points are close to each other, and I had to assess each group's qualities and name them myself. The notion of closeness means that I needed to find a way to scale the data so that groups had similar sizes and densities, which I found by dividing each of the Pokemon stats by the value of their highest stat, and I chose to make 6 clusters because that number minimized the within-cluster variation. With that background in mind, let's go over each of the combat groups that I discovered. Our first group is the balanced group, which is characterized by a fairly even spread of base stats. These Pokemon may be adaptable without a strong niche. It's the largest group, featuring 279 forms, and it is common among grass, dragon, and poison Pokemon, but not among electric, rock, or bug. Our next group are the defenders. Defenders stand out for their ability to shrug off attacks and slowly wear down an opponent or apply buffs and debuffs. This group is uncommon overall, but specifically common among rock, steel, and bug types. Our third group is the jab group. Unlike the defenders, jabs come out fast and seek to take out an opponent in one punch. But if they don't knock out the opponent first, they do not have the defensive stats to take many hits themselves. Jabs are common among normal, flying, and electric Pokemon, but uncommon among psychic, steel, and grass. Muscles share jabs' focus on delivering physical attacks, but they trade in speed for more bulk in the form of HP and defense. Because the group is focused on 3 primary stats, it does include outliers who may lack in one stat or another. Muscles are common among fighting, ground, and normal Pokemon, but they are anathema to psychic and electric, and also uncommon to flying. The Mystics resemble muscles, but rather than focus on physical attacks, they're better at delivering and rebuffing ranged elemental attacks. Mystics can be found often among psychic, fairy, and grass Pokemon. We've seen before that fighting and psychic types do not share groups, and we see that again here. And the final group is the Pistols. Personally, these are my favorite Pokemon. Pistols are like the jab group, but they don't bother punching. Instead, they fire strong elemental attacks before their opponent can move. Electric, fire, and psychic Pokemon are iconic pistols, and entirely unlike their ground, rock, and fighting counterparts. When we step back and look at the groups overall, we see that they are evenly distributed among the Pokemon, except for the balanced and defender groups, which implies that many Pokemon are created from neutral stat distributions and don't specialize unless there's a reason to. Based on a chi-squared test, ice, poison, and water types distribute their groups the most proportionately, but rock Pokemon skew towards defenders, fighting Pokemon skew towards muscles and jabs, and psychic Pokemon skew towards mystics and pistols. Fighting mystics and normal defenders are entirely unrepresented in the population. With the groups already made, I was curious how effective they are in predicting Pokemon's types, so I trained 3 random forest classifiers to compare. At this point, I should note that finding the very best model for predicting types and various ways of accounting for multiple types could be its own project. I only wanted a baseline. Compared to the model trained only on ecological data, adding the groups significantly reduced testing error, at least on an alpha of 0.1, which is fair for a low-stakes model and very synthetic data. The groups were made from detailed stats, so I also wanted to compare how much performance was lost by using the less detailed groups, and it turned out that they performed almost as well. Training error was lower with more detailed data to train, but the mean test error was plausibly the same in both models, which suggests that groups are less sensitive to overfitting. So our conclusions. Pokemon stat archetypes can be meaningfully summarized into 6 groups. I named them the Balance, Defender, Jab, Muscle, Mystic, and Pistol. Pokemon types are often closely associated with certain groups. Examples include that Rock and Steel types are often Defenders, or Psychic types are often Mystics or Pistols. Ice types, on the other hand, are represented fairly in all groups. There's other details mentioned earlier. Finally, the groups can naturally and effectively substitute for detailed combat stats in type predicting models. Thank you.